It's the Dragon's blatant dare at the border. China is once again provoking India. After skirmishes between unarmed troops of India and China at the line of actual control, amidst reports of destruction of bunkers, China has now confirmed it has closed the Nathula pass in Sikkim, citing the ongoing standoff and security concerns as the reason. Only recently, a video had surfaced of Indian and Chinese troops jostling with each other. They're both unarmed troops. India says, sources in government of India tell India today that these troops had violated, they transgressed the line of actual control. Politely but very firmly, Indian troops told them to back off. This led to some jostling. There have also been unconfirmed reports of damage to some non-permanent bunkers on the Indian side in one instance, on the Chinese side in another instance. China has accused India of blocking a road construction project, of physically blocking a road construction project in what China claims is Chinese territory. India hasn't officially reacted to it, but sources say that India stopped this because it was on Indian territory. Now, the first batch of 47 pilgrims were denied entry between the 19th and the 23rd of June at Nathula in Sikkim. India Today's Beijing correspondent Anant Krishnan now joins me with the latest on this. Anant, so this is now confirmed that this is punitive Chinese action against India for what happened at the line of actual control. So explain this. What happened? What has it led to? And what does this mean, Anant?
That's right, Gaurav. As India Today has been reporting since this morning, it's becoming very apparent now that the closure of Nathula was not because of landslides or any other reason, but because of a measure by the Chinese side in response to what happened along the Sikkim sector of the boundary, a standoff incident that has been taking place for the last 10 days or so. It's unprecedented that a punitive measure would, such as preventing pilgrims from entering the yatra, which is a goodwill gesture between both countries. It's the first time something like this has happened. So it raises troubling questions. Immediately now the focus would be on the flag meeting that will have to take place along the boundary to settle the videos that we've seen as well of jostling between the troops on both sides, triggered by a Chinese road construction project very close to the Indian border. And as far as India is concerned, something that they thought was going to enter into Indian territory. So the Indian Army had to stand ground, which of course has led to this standoff situation.
Anand, stay with me. I want to bring in Ambassador Rajiv Dogra for more on this. Ambassador Dogra, what do you make of these developments stopping the Amarnath Yatra? This, in a way, is punishing India, punishing Indian people when they're out on a pilgrimage for a border standoff between soldiers, which perhaps is routine along the LAC.
Well, there have been some reports, unconfirmed reports, of course, about China nibbling away at Indian territory in the past few months, perhaps even years. But neither that nor Chinese incursions into Depsang, Chumar area in the previous years have led to the kind of punitive action which is now being reported. So this is serious. And let's hope that this stops at this stage and there's no further escalation. Because what is even more worrying is a deliberate Chinese desire to send out a message to Washington and New Delhi when the two leaders were meeting in Washington this morning. Because the Chinese Foreign Ministry briefing on the incident has come in this morning only. And China does not do such kind of briefings just impulsively. It must have calculated, it definitely knows that the two leaders are going to issue a joint statement around the same time. Okay. So what is it that China aims by this provocation and by this punitive measure?
Okay, that's a very interesting angle that you've added to it. And Anant, do you then see this as a retaliation for that skirmish at the LAC and the alleged destruction of bunkers or stopping of road construction? Or do you see this as in response to a joint statement where a very strong statement has been made, which in a way helps India's case when it comes to China-Pakistan economic corridor or connectivity, when it talks of transparency, when it talks of respecting territorial integrity, and when it talks of so many other aspects which in a way expose China and buttress India's point on one belt, one road?
Well, Gaurav, I would say this has more to do with the on-the-ground situation along the boundary, less so with what's happening in Washington, only because this is something that's been brewing for the last 10 days or so. And the pilgrims were, of course, stopped on June 19th for the first time. And in the past as well, boundary incidents have generally been sort of tit for tats in terms of responses to infrastructure, bunkers, roads being built along the line of actual control, usually in the western sector. But it is, as you said, quite troubling that what was usually contained as a boundary issue is now having a spillover effect and affecting a very unrelated issue of pilgrims. Now, I think this is a new development, a troubling development, something we've seen with China, Japan in the past, with their disputes leading to, or even with South Korea, with tour groups being affected. It hasn't happened with India, China in the past, so this is something that we have to keep a very close watch on.
You know, just for the benefit of our viewers, one thing needs to be clarified. The Kailash Mansarovar Yatra per se has not been stopped. And Anand, correct me if I'm wrong, the Yatra is still on. It's only the Nathula route that has been shut down. The other route, the Lipu Lake route is still on. Am I correct?
That's absolutely correct. And I think important for us to remember that most of the pilgrims will be going through the Lipu Lake route. Out of 1,430 pilgrims undertaking the Yatra this summer, 1,080 will be going through Lipu Lake. And the first batch, even in the middle of this skirmish, the first batch of about 60 pilgrims was already allowed entry into Tibet, and they are now in Tibet undertaking the Yatra, and as far as we know, with no difficulties. So hopefully China will see sense and allow the rest of the 1,000 pilgrims to go through Lipu Lake. And hopefully, if the flag meeting turns out to be productive, the other 6 remaining batches, totally about 300 people, will be allowed, hopefully, to go through Nathula as well. So we'll have to wait and see, but the hope is that the 6 other batches will be allowed to carry on as planned.
Congress Party spokesperson Mohammad Khan also with me on the broadcast. Mohammad Khan, what China is doing morally and legally, how do you see this?
It's reprehensible, Gaurav. Gaurav, I would say this. Look, anybody who's been a casual observer of India-China relations over the last decade would tell you that this is not the behavior of a friend. In fact, one would say this is a very recalcitrant neighbor. Let's look at their actions over the last 10 years. Aksai Chin, repeated violations on their end, encroachment of territory, building this road in a unilateral fashion, deliberately designed to jeopardize India's strategic interests, right? And they make no secret about that. Number 2, they openly went out of their way to block India's bid to the NSG. That is nothing but petty international politics. China would have not lost anything by it, but would have instead gained a valuable ally. The fact that they did this demonstrates a very, very petty intent to block India from becoming the superpower that it's inevitably going to become in this region. Now, I think China, right now what they've done, right? Even the Geneva Convention, as you and I were discussing, prohibits this kind of behavior. These are civilians. These are non-combatants as defined under the Geneva Convention. You do not make them participants in your proxy war or your,
and these attempts. Are pilgrims.
These are pilgrims,
absolutely.
Exactly. They're protected from such action.
Ambassador Dogra, you know, the point that the Congress Party spokesperson here is making, just how petty can China be, and in a situation like this. So let's join the dots, Ambassador. China blocks India's entry to the nuclear suppliers group. China blocks the designation of Maulana Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. And now China is blocking Amarnath Yatris from the Nathula route. Just how petty can China be, and what should India's response be to this?
Well, absolutely. This is quite in line with China's behavior. It has been getting away with its single-minded determination with every neighbor of its. Japan was mentioned recently by your correspondent from China. Korea was mentioned. Let's add Philippines and rest of Vietnam and so on to the list. Even the arbitration award in case of Philippines, China has not respected. And every single island in South China Sea and other places, China has had its way. It has not allowed other countries to push things beyond a point if China does not like it. So
Yes.
we are facing a country which is quite determined and which is quite one-sided in its view of things. So
And perhaps
we have
we should
a problem on that. And
No, and we should
the
be
other
equally
thing is,
determined.
why
We should be
China?
equally determined. India clearly
Why
should not buckle
China?
under Chinese pressure. If China stops the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra through the Nathula route, perhaps Indian people should come together and say, fine, you block that route, we will not take that route, but we will not buckle under pressure. That is where the people of India should ensure that there is a Lakshman Rekha that is drawn. Just how far can China push India?
Exactly. No, there are a number of other points. I mean, China feels it can transgress into Indian territory. For example, the road you're talking about, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, passes through Indian territory, but China does not care for it.
Yes.
China has problems in Arunachal Pradesh, despite knowing that historically Arunachal Pradesh has always been part of India. What is not part of China is Tibet. So
Yes.
when it comes to its own, China has one standard. When it comes to another country, China sets different standards.
And Anant, it's very difficult to perhaps second guess, what India's response should be and what China's response would be. But is China surprised by what India's response has been under this regime, or is it the same as in the past? Okay, I'll try and fix that line with Anant Krishnan in just a moment.